Good afternoon. Welcome to the next Breakout. This session is going to be highlighting options, planting recovery seeds, and harvesting hope. And we always start each breakout with a voice of recovery. And in this case, I am doubling as the voice of recovery. And as the program manager for options, I'll be introducing the program. And then we have a group of people that are going to share. We have Eric Miller, who's going to share about the demographic and data information that help back up the program. And Justin's going to be sharing a case study on a really special encounter that he's had. But to begin it, as the voice of recovery for this breakout, I can share a little bit of my story, my journey in recovery, which has been the centerpiece of my life for the last 4 decades. My story of impacts on my life were my use of drugs and alcohol as a youngster. I started drinking when I was 13. By the time I was 16, I was having blackouts, and it was impacting my life in every way. And the older I got as a teenager, the more substances that were impacting my life, that were, as I say sometimes, they were now on the menu. And my menu was getting bigger, and the problems in my life were getting larger, and the desperation was getting worse. And at some point through my late teens and early 20s, there were a series of events that most people thought I wasn't going to make it. There was 2 drug overdoses, 2 drunk driving arrests, a variety of things that just did not work out in my life. And the warning signs were, everybody who knew me was questioning and warning of what they thought was going to happen. And I was filled with anguish and despair and suffering. And as we talked about this morning, there was no hope. But even then, for me, it wasn't even I felt hopeless. It was just I was driven by the substances in my life. And it was interesting for me, like all the topics that have been touched on in the summit, when my experience with an overdose, that was not the moment of change for me. And the arrests for drunk driving, they were not the moment of change. And the moment of change happened. It was a serious episode in my life, but it wasn't necessarily the most serious. But it was an emotional turnaround where I realized finally I was able to say, yes, I need hope. I need help. And I found some hope. And I didn't know what help was. And I went into rehab in that summer. And when I got out, I think the most, and I've shared this with some people during the summit this day, that the real benefit of early recovery was getting out of rehab and people telling me what to do. And they said, well, tomorrow we're all meeting and we're going to go play softball. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time, was very hip, slick, and cool in my 20s. And I was like, I don't want to go play softball. But it turned out that was the turning point, because I showed up at this park, clean and sober, and there were 50 people there. And we had this fun afternoon, and they told me, well, now tonight we're going here, and tomorrow we're doing this, and then next week something else. And it was that sense of community. It was a lot like the last talk from Dr. Noble. The sense of community, the sense of you're not doing this alone, is what drove me in early recovery. And the foundation that I've been able to lean on really was formed in that way. And as time went on, early in my recovery journey, the tools of the pathway that I chose, they became not more readily available, but more acceptable to me. I had less resistance because I'm already in. I'm all in. Just tell me what to do now. I already like it. I'm already as we say sometimes, there are benefits to membership rather than being a guest, just like joining the gym. You could take a tour of Planet Fitness, but unless you put on your clothes and you work out, nothing's gonna happen. So I wound up showing up, and I was an active participant in the recovery pathway that I chose, like my life depended upon it, which in retrospect, it did. It did. And my early recovery led to a marriage and a family and all the things that everybody who knew me thought that was never going to be possible. And I didn't die, and my life turned around. And what I think for me, the message of sustaining long-term recovery is really so valuable, because what can happen, and it's like anything, it's like if you play sports, right? If you watch professionals, they practice. If you're a professional golfer, you go to the driving range before the match and you practice. You'd think, don't they know how to do this by now? And the answer is practice. That's what we do. And for me, recovery has been about that. And it has evolved over the years from what I did early on, which had a lot of that community fellowship based, to as time has gone by, I've developed practices in recovery, and includes many things that I never would have imagined myself doing, like meditation and service to people. And it just certainly sustains recovery, but it's not limited to that. It sustains the human connection. It sustains families. It can change how we interact with people at work. It's really the foundation of, as Dr. Noble was saying, the human condition. And recovery, for me, what I've learned to understand is once you stop the substances and really want to change your life, the recovery is that process of evolution that is so valuable. And as we segue into the program itself in a minute with how the options liaisons do that, is very close to my heart. But to me, the most beautiful example of recovery in my life was that 25-year-old kid that everybody thought was going to die and had lost hope in. That person evolved into a grandfather and a beautiful marriage in recovery with my wife, Deborah. But we now together collectively as a Brady Bunch have 10 grandchildren. And this person in recovery gets to be the centerpiece as papa to those grandchildren. And they fight to sit next to me at holiday dinners, and they don't know what the journey looked like. But little by little, I might start telling them as they grow up, because the same way I did it with my kids who only saw a father in recovery. And this summer I'll celebrate 42 years in recovery. And there's a couple of us around here who are 80s class members. I know Tom and Dave and a few others. It changed my life. And I don't like to say it saved my life, because what would have been worse is to have lived in anguish and despair. To live suffering from addiction would have been worse, I think. And I seen that. I had an opportunity to work in the recovery field before I worked for the state. And you can carry a message to people. I like to call it seed planters. You can Johnny Appleseed recovery, but you really aren't responsible for what happens. You can help them. You can teach how to nurture. You can teach how to cultivate a garden. You can teach how to make things grow. You can teach what places to go, as the liaisons do. You can be a resource broker. But the most powerful thing is example. And the most powerful thing is to live that life and allow the evolution to be the example. Allow that to be, this is possible for you. And I often share the longevity of my personal recovery just because it's important to know that it is possible, that there are people that come in here from a rehab who know nothing and get it and give it back. And I've been very fortunate and lucky and got a big life from it. And I'm really grateful how it's turned out. Now I've been working with this in this position at the state, and I've been fortunate enough in the SUD division to have so many wonderful programs that I'm able to not only handle professionally, because I had a business career besides this, but so professionally I'm fortunate enough to do the work, but I'm also able to infiltrate some of my recovery story into my daily interactions, and I'm really grateful for that. So that's the Voice of Recovery portion of the show, and thanks everybody for listening, and we will now move into the slideshow. Is it up there yet? Yep. So, planting recovery seeds and harvesting hope. You could tell I stole that title for share the gardening metaphor and the theme of the summit itself about hope and the idea of what we've accomplished with all these summits and how we addressed collectively as a state the opioid epidemic. Let's see if this works. So, and I really owe to the previous options program managers. I saw Sybil here earlier and Rob's here. I did not know the acronym. So it's good to know, right? It's a wonderful acronym. I wonder who created it, but overdose prevention through intensive outreach, naloxone, and safety. And I loved how the governor was talking about the amount of naloxone that was distributed in the state. And I'll share it now. I had an accidental overdose when I was 25 on heroin, and they didn't have Narcan then. And I was very lucky that somebody who, she was not, in very good shape herself, but somehow managed to save my life and revive me. And, but yet, that's not when the rest of it changed. So anyway, back to options, right? What it is. SUD clinical co-responder embedded within a first responder agency. And that's certainly how it was born. That was such an important thing years ago, 7 years ago, when the overdose rate was so much higher, and that was like the immediate need, was this is a crisis and we have to get out there and do this. It has evolved since then in a wonderful way. Community-based recovery support partner, and that's, what's so valuable is they're out in the street. They're not in an office, behind the desk, maybe sometimes, but typically they're out in the field, they're helping people. They are boosted by our wonderful media campaign and the messaging. We had a little rundown of the social media at our lunch. We support and are supported by the Good Samaritan law, which, if you're not familiar, is that law where it's safe to help somebody, it's safe to call, and you won't get in trouble. There's the hard part is, at the real grassroots level, is your friend is overdosing and you don't want to call the police because you're going to get arrested. And that law protected that. But 45 years ago, they didn't think that way. Anti-stigma, which is always, a critical part of this, and secondary prevention services, which, are evolving all the time, right? The program components, I've got lots of notes with this too. The options liaison embedded in a first responder agency. So they work closely, whether it's, and we have so many great examples of the way they embed in either with the EMS or with the police and other community partners. It's a wonderful collaboration. They co-respond to overdose and SUD-related emergencies. And that's so valuable because when that human wakes up, They don't want to see a scary policeman. And it's like, the idea is to have a recovery-based person to be able to facilitate that, moment of revival. And it's a great asset. Proactive referrals, which is, that resource broker component where people still don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to call. We can help. Connection to a recovery coach. And we have this great network of, right now, I think it's 31 liaisons and 8 recovery coaches. And the whole idea is there's some different certification, licensure, different training that creates different levels of expertise. The recovery coaches have one type. The liaisons in general have a few other types. But it's just a wonderful resource. And they also have the required TA participation. We have great backup from Amy and Eric and Oliver and the MMA organization with great support for the liaisons. And we have regular trainings and regular meetings and really support them, which is great. And as community-based partners, the community low barrier access points, which they collaborate with the syringe service programs, recovery centers, clubhouses. I've heard a lot about them all day today. Education and connection to local secondary prevention services. That's so important because people don't know everything. They don't know where to go. I still get calls. I need Narcan. I don't know where to get it. And the answer is we do. The liaisons do. OBH does. The SUD department does. We collaborate in order to get those recovery capital gains, which is basically helping people understand what progress they can make and that there's no success or failure in the recovery journey. There's only action we take and lessons we learn. And that's so valuable because there are no mistakes. There's no bad thing that happened because what if that's the launch pad? Just like with me, my bottom, those really terrifying events were the launch pad for me. And that's huge. And that's what you can learn with recovery capital studies. Community coalitions, there's such a great network in Maine. There's, at least 20 Zoom meetings a month with different coalitions in all different counties. And that's a offshoot from COVID, I think. I don't know that they did it. Nobody did much of anything on Zoom before COVID, and I know I see Edie a lot on the coalition meetings, and they're wonderful networking. If you don't know what to do, you go on that meeting and say, hey, I got this person and I don't know where to go. There are people who help. Tom Hibbert, he facilitates the MERN. It's a great network. And of course, they partner with hospital EDs, county jails. There's each liaison has a strength and different level of relationships in their area, and that's why we have more than one in many of the counties, just because everybody's got a little to offer it's always good. It's almost like that multidisciplinary team. It's good to have a variety of people to bring something to the table. And of course, they reach out to the public health and field outreach. And it's all supported by our media campaign also. The media campaign does a couple of videos, and these are these 30-second commercials that quite a few of the folks here today have been highlighted in. And it's amazing, I think, what content can be squeezed into a 30-second spot on a TV ad. And I still get chills whenever I see them, that we can really carry a message, not only of recovery, but options as an answer. We promote it through the website, knowyouroptions.me, but the whole idea that through media we can spread the word, and we do a lot on social media, and our Facebook page is very active. The primary responsibilities of liaisons, you can read them, I can rattle them off. They have, on any given day, a variety of jobs. Certainly the post-overdose follow-up, Maine Mom Connection, Maine Care Application. You can help people fill stuff out. There are people who don't know how to log onto a computer. There are people who don't have smartphones. We can help. Continuing engagement in the community, well, of course, that's what they're best at. Data tracking, we do have a little work for them. They log in, they keep track of data. You're going to hear a lot about it from Eric. Connection to the FQHC or other provider for HIV and Hep testing. Helping people. I'm a survivor of Hep C. I mean, it was knowing that they had a cure, knowing how to get it, and I didn't know. I had to find out, and just being able to pass that on to people and say, hey, this is okay, we can fix this. It's amazing, and you just don't know what you don't know until you find out people are unaware. OD map notifications, spike alerts, that's something that comes through to certain people, but we can certainly spread the word on some key areas. Bangor had an issue recently with HIV spike. There's and they're not always life. There's fatal and non-fatal spike alerts, but we can communicate that so the community can sort of focus in on what might be happening. And of course, I am a big fan of, just amazed by the naloxone distribution and the training, because it's one thing to hand it out, and the fact that there's hundreds of thousands have been distributed. The training is so vital, because it's like if you've ever taken, I was a soccer coach and you had to take CPR training, and I was like, I hope I never need this because I don't know if I know how to do it. And Narcan training, which is actually easier, is one of those things where training just gives you a level of comfort that if this happens, I will know what to do. And there's a lot of different elements to what somebody might experience, but training is it's like practice, right? Training is really the backbone of that. Secondary prevention support, which is wonderful to just point out the multiple pathways and the different possibilities for people, right? And of course, we help with assessment and or treatment referral. There's always the ASAM criteria, but we as liaisons really, it's at the gut level, that you kind of know, I suggest you call here, or I suggest we go here. They're not out there diagnosing, but there's a general sense of like, you need to go here, and then wherever they get to go, they can be helped appropriately. Community anti-stigma education is also so vital. And I think the liaisons themselves, as recovery advocates, are that example of, I'm a person who's turned my life around. And, I lost the stigma a long time ago. And I protected my anonymity to a big, except here, right? But I have respected it over the years to share appropriately, which stigma can, it can really help to be able to share it in a private setting confidentially. And then of course, resources and navigation and barrier removal, which is, I can't get there. We're not a taxi service, but I'll tell you what, we give rides. There are people who need a ride, they get them. And, there's debate about, well, how best to handle that. And the agencies do a great job of that. But, there are many barriers. I can't get a job. I don't want to lose my job. I got my wife. I got my kids. It has been said today that until you say it out loud, a barrier can't be removed. And that's what's wonderful. In general, what I think is most important, that the real essence of being an options liaison and the essence of the options program is a recovery to help people rebuild their lives. And there are multiple pathways, and we guide people to them. Don't have to, if somebody, and I've always done that, if somebody asks me, I will tell them, yeah, this is what I did and this is how I did it. But there are many pathways, and that's the good news. There are wonderful resources and ideas and ways for people to practice changing their lives. And as we heard today, it's rarely achieved in isolation, which is great to go out in the community and really express this, and be able to share it with people. And it reflects a greater meaning beyond our immediate struggles. It's like we can help. And that's, I think the liaisons really develop that sense of we. And that's what today was all about, right? It was about, this is what we've been able to do. So with that, we will move on to data, demographics, and Eric, thanks for the opportunity, and we'll go on with the rest of the program. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Miller. I'm a research associate at the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center at the University of Maine. And it is a privilege to be standing here, to be serving in this role as the person who receives all the reports, the thousands of reports that the liaisons submit, which maybe people aren't envious of that role, but I really enjoy working with all that information. And it really shows how much liaisons do and the variety of roles that Richard was just mentioning in the reports that they submit. And so they cover a lot of different things. Of course, there's the basic demographic information, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, race, as well as the programmatic demographics that we are interested in knowing about the clients. Housing status, what type of insurance they have, if they have it, and a bunch of other things, the context in which they came in contact with the liaison. Did the person need themselves approach the liaison? Is it a post-overdose follow-up? Did an impacted other refer them? Or was it a law enforcement connection, EMS connection? There are a lot of pathways to a liaison. Liaison may go to them and find them as well. And so they submit a lot of information in these reports, and how they collect it is not like an interview. That last bullet point on the left-hand column notes that it comes in the flow of a conversation. It's to maintain a relationship with the person, to make sure that they feel welcome and not like it's a healthcare visit. In a way it is, but make people feel like it's low barrier and comfortable and want to come back. So to run through some of this initial data, and there's going to be some visualizations after this, but from October 2023 through June 2026, last month, there were over 3,100 co-response or post-overdose follow-ups, which are often conducted alongside law enforcement partners. There were over 2,100 clients referred to community-based treatment programs, over 4,100 individuals referred to community-based recovery support programs, and almost 14,000 people trained in overdose and anti-stigma education, which is an amazing feat. And Richard was mentioning all the kits of naloxone distributed, 15,547 kits of naloxone distributed, and this data does not cover the entirety of the Options program. Options has been going since 2020-ish, and so there's more information. It's just the way that the information is collected changed a little bit over time. So that's why I have it in the time frame that we have here. And so the way that people are connected with Options liaisons, kind of like what I was talking about before, is most often the person need themselves approaching the liaison or getting in contact with the liaison. I was just in a session for the connection with in rural areas in Piscataquis County, and the Options liaison there mentioned how they get connected on Facebook pretty much most times before they meet in person. And so it really is a creative and varied way that people get in touch. And then general outreach from Options liaisons and family and impacted others. So what I think a lot of people want to know is like, okay, so people get connected with Options liaisons, then what? And so that answer can result in it's a peer connection, could be a referral to somewhere, it could be like I need resources, whether it's naloxone or if it's to secondary prevention, harm reduction, or what have you. In this case, we have a little bit of some evaluation of what happens. And so of those that are referred to treatment, nearly 69% of those people engage with a provider after they've been referred to treatment. So that's a high uptake of those getting referred to treatment going and engaging, and it's hard to keep track of everyone, and this data set is de-identified, and so we don't know who's going where and where that ultimately goes eventually, but we do have some insights here. And so to talk about the people who engage with options liaisons, we have a lot of information at the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center. We have a great relationship with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner because of my boss, Dr. Marcella Sorg. And so we know what this information means in the context of other areas in the state. So the pie chart on the left, options clients by gender. The 55% male, 44% female aligns with the non-fatal data that we see from EMS, for instance. And so this is an interesting validation of who has a substance use disorder, and what does it look like in the state of Maine. And we also ask about people who they prefer not to answer or who identify as transgender, and it's a small percentage of those folks who divulge that information. On the right, we have the age groups that options liaisons engage with most, with the top red small slice being the 19 and under, and then it ages increasing counterclockwise. So that orange is 20 to 29, and then the two biggest slices at the bottom are the 30 to 39 and 40 to 49. And that's important because that demographic, the 30 to 49-year-olds, are those that seem to pop up most in the fatal overdose data that we get. And so the fact that options liaisons are engaging with those folks the most is an encouraging sign for preventing a possible fatal overdose. On the left, we have housing status. That orange slice at the bottom are folks that are experiencing homelessness, and the gray-bluish slice in the top right is the folks experiencing housing instability. And so we see over half the pie are composed of people who are experiencing some sort of housing instability, which positions the options liaisons to engage with people who don't get engaged with that much. And so it's a really amazing thing that we can get some insights as to who these people are, where they are, as well as on the reciprocal end, they've got a peer to connect with as well. On the right, we have clients by insurance status, and the vast majority have Maine Care. And some don't have insurance, some have private insurance still, some are older people who have Medicare or have both Medicare and Medicaid. And so over time, the opioid epidemic has changed a lot, and this is just in the past few years, showing options liaisons client community contacts from this October 2023 to June 2026 period, and we can see a gradual increase over that time frame. Now, this is a reflection of also how active the options liaisons are, but it's also and how people are approaching them. It's a very dynamic program. The person who was in this role before me on my team liked to say that the options program really is like 16 different programs, with each county having its own connections. If you're in Piscataquis, it looks different than York, and so on. And so this is a really interesting thing, and the increase in early 2025 and seems to be level off is really interesting. The referrals to treatment also increased in 2025. Don't know if that's just like a temporary elevated thing or if it'll kind of keep down at a lower level. Only time will tell. But the way that people can get connected into different resources for them in that moment, it seemed in 2025, referrals to treatment were something that people wanted to engage with. And then kits with naloxone has been a steady increase over time since late 2023. And that is always an encouraging sign, and it takes a lot of work, and I am proud to be the one to work on this stuff, and thank you for having me. And that's it for the data situation. So I am happy to bring Justin up to the stage, the options liaison, to share a story.
Hello, I'm Justin Martin. I'm one of the options liaisons for Central Aroostook County. I'm based out of Caribou. The entire reason I'm here is these folks. This is the Gordon family. I met them maybe 2 months into my job. They had reached out, the Motive Care had canceled on them due to inclement weather. They needed a ride to the methadone clinic. And that's how I met this family. At the time, when I met them actually, the children were not staying with them, they were staying with her mother. Actually, I'll back up a little bit and I'll tell their story from the beginning, not my story of meeting them so much. The Gordon family, they both have 10 years under their belts of being sober right now. Coincidentally, the youngest, Theo, is 10 years old. And their recovery completely centers around that little boy. 10 years ago, they were both heroin addicts living in Massachusetts, bouncing around between Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Mostly homeless. They were couch hopping for a while. Their oldest daughter, she ended up staying with Kylie's mom for quite a while because they were worried about her not living on the street with them. Their mother, or Kylie's mother, ended up finding a piece of property up in Van Buren, Maine for super cheap. She was just looking for the cheapest place to live and to get out of the city. She found this little house up in Van Buren. She moved up, and about a month later, she invited the family to move in with her. She had their daughter, Aubrey, at the time. Theo was staying with the mother, and they picked up everything they had and moved up to northern Maine. It was about a car's worth of stuff. I don't think they even filled the car, to be honest. At that point in their life, they had both been going to methadone clinics for about 8 years. When they moved up to northern Maine, we don't really have a lot of resources up in Aroostook County. And they spent the first month and a half in Aroostook County driving from northern Maine 9.5 hours to go out of state to their old clinic to get 3-week-long take-homes and then drive back up to the county with no license, no vehicle, bumming rides and paying gas or trading things for gas or however they can do it. The graciousness of family and some good folks every once in a while got them there. And they've told me that there was plenty of times where they would split their dosages between the two of them to stretch it out. And they had a really rough road for a really long time. When I met them, I immediately oh my gosh, no, there's a methadone clinic in Presque Isle, it's an hour from you. I'll hook you up. Got in contact with them, and Kylie had expressed that she wanted to start talking to someone, so I got them in contact with somebody for counseling services. And that's where I met them at that point. They, over the next 2 years, or the past 2 years, or 2.5 years I've known them, they have become one of the most wonderful families I've ever met in my life. They really have. They have beautiful children. Their outlook on life is amazing. They've had their struggles. I got them going to the methadone clinic. When they started going to the methadone clinic up here, they were struggling. They had to go every day. There's no more take-homes, so they had to get a ride from Van Buren to Presque Isle every single day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, go on Saturdays and get your Sunday take-home for both of them. And sometimes the rides wouldn't align and they would have to go separate and split the children or bring both children to the methadone clinic along with them. And it was really rough. Eventually, when I got to know them a little bit more and started interacting with them a little bit more, I was able to get them into housing in Van Buren, into public housing, brought them to the housing place and had them fill out and I can definitely say one of the proudest things that I've done in this job, in the options program, is they got the keys for their first apartment. I picked them up from her mom's house and I brought them to their apartment so they could move in for their first time. And watching Theo, their littlest one, the reason that they're sober, run upstairs and then come back down and say, "Is that bedroom for me?" Because he's never had a bedroom in his life, a whole room to himself. He's shared everything he's ever had his entire life with that family. And he came up to me and gave me a hug and just said thank you. And that moment means more to me than anything I've done in this job. It's incredibly humbling sometimes to work with folks and to see the strength that's in people. And then you hear their stories and you hear how they've been beaten down and you hear the horrible stuff that's happened to them. And I mean, those two folks, they had to ship their kids away to live with her mom because at one point they were living in a mausoleum in a cemetery because no one goes to look for homeless folks there and they could get away with it. That was their reality. And, you know, picking up trash and bottles and stuff to be able to afford a hit of heroin. That was their life. And to see them now where they have a roof over their head, she has her license, she's had a couple jobs, she's still working on getting back into the workforce. They're working on stepping down out of methadone, going to a monthly shot, and they just want to be done with it. And that's their goals right now. And it's not something that I take lightly. This is the little things we do for people sometimes change lives. They change families, they make families. They bring families back together, and we hear these things and we hear these stories about folks. Like this is the story I was involved with. And this is a family that exists because this program exists and we all pull our parts in. And every small little part makes such a big difference sometimes. This is a family that I know them personally very well. They live about 4 streets over from me now. But they're only one of so many that we deal with. Kyle himself, he was, his personal story, he was exposed to alcohol and drugs at about 8 years old. He started drinking at a young age, 8, 9 years old. He was smoking crack with his mom at a young age. His siblings have been in and out of jail, and all of them involved with drugs. That was his reality as a young child. He didn't know anything different. And then he met Kylie in recovery. They met in their first failed run at recovery in a recovery home. And they stuck it together. Then they used together. And they went through recovery together, and they relapsed together. And they did that cycle over and over and over again. And it finally took moving out of that area, moving away from all the bad influences, moving away from the connections and the people they knew, into the middle of nowhere. It doesn't get much more remote than Van Buren, Maine. It's 1,000 people, 4 hours north of here into the woods. There's nothing else out there. And watching them just start over from scratch with nothing and doing it with a smile on their face every step of the way, because just they're able to. They're able to do those things. They're able to make those choices. They're here and they have their kids. That's something that they both expressed. They didn't think they were going to get their kids back. They were worried that DHS was going to step in at any time and sweep them away. That's part of why they were hiding them at her mom's house. It was because they didn't want DHS to get involved, because if they knew that mom and dad were using and living on streets, they would have taken those children in a heartbeat. And I went to their kid's birthday party this past summer, you know. These are the reasons that we do our jobs. And these are the reasons, these folks, this family is the reason that I like what I do. I love what I do, you know, and it's not them particular, well, they're a good example, but it's over and over and over again, the way we were able to touch people and we were able to affect people's lives. I'll be honest, it's hard for me to not break out into tears a little bit. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old at home. They don't know the old me. They don't like this family where those children have known and seen what their parents have gone through. They were young, but they don't have a full grasp, but they know that mom and dad struggled. They know mom and dad had to send them to go live with grandma because they didn't have a house. They were sleeping on the streets. My kids don't know my background. And I'm pretty proud of what I'm able to tell them about where my past has led me to now. And this is a family that they're able to do the same thing, that they're able to be proud of who they are with their children and tell their story to their children. And as far as I'm concerned, all of this stuff is worth it because of these small stories, these single families that make all of it worth it. When I spoke to them last week and told them I was bringing their story to the state, Kylie instantly, heck yeah, she's super excited. She's an extremely energetic lady, and she was super excited, and I invited them to be able to come here. And they weren't able to make it today. But they asked me to express exactly what that quote is on there, that they have had a chance to do the things because they're sober and they've been able to find happiness as a family through recovery. And they're a family because of it. They're a stronger family because of it. These folks I personally think they'll be able to conquer anything life throws at them, because if they can get to where they are now with the crap that they've been through, man, they can conquer anything. And the confidence that we build in people sometimes just by helping a little bit builds that self-confidence inside people, and being able to see that and hear how we impact people. I don't know a lot of folks that are more than, it's the 5 degrees of separation from substance use of some sort, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, it comes down to families. It comes down to the individuals. The policies are great, and our departments are great and all that, but we're doing it for the individuals. We're doing it for the people. And I just can't express how grateful I am that we're able to do this for folks. My path is not far off from theirs, in certain aspects, a choice or two away. And I know there's a lot of folks in this room where only a choice or two away from shit really hitting the fan and being in those spots. And personally, it's magic what we can do for folks sometimes. When we see the 500 bad stories that we get, and the 30 phone calls I make to 30 different people that go nowhere, or the people that blow me off, it hurts a little bit. This makes up for every single bit of it plus more. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that's here for doing everything that you do and allowing us to do our jobs. The options program is amazing. It's amazing. The help that we're able to do, and the breadth of things and the scope of things that we're able to go about. Where I can go bring them to the methadone clinic if they need to. I can bring them to the housing if I need to. I can sit there with them. I can do all the things that most other departments or most other positions, their hands are tied in one spot and they gotta reach out to somebody else. And there has to be a group effort of 15 people coming together to do sometimes what one liaison I can do that in an afternoon. Hop in the car, let's go, and we'll take care of it. And it's awesome. It genuinely is. And I just want to say thank you guys for everything that everyone in this room does, even just being there for folks. Because stories like this are worth it every time. Thank you guys.
I'm not quite sure what the next slide is. other than thank you. We have a few minutes left, and we could open up for a couple of questions. But there's another point I wanted to make, and this story is not unique. It's a miracle story. It's heartwarming. It's amazing. And they are more frequent than you might know. And whether it happens under the umbrella of state government or whether it's just on the community basis in a mutual aid setting, this does happen. This does happen. And there's a couple of things about being a liaison that I wish I was a liaison sometimes because I love that work. But there's some things that are amazing about it. And one is, and I've talked to a few of the guys who've been here 6, 7 years. You got Ashley Roberts, Dave Bilodeau, Tom Hibbert. You know, there's the idea that the consistency that allows people to show up on a regular basis. People in Lewiston know Dave Bilodeau is the options liaison. People up north know Ashley Roberts. And I'm not calling them out for any particular reason. I'm just calling out the consistency and how wonderful that is, because the people in the community, and we talk about this in our overdose data meetings, and I talk about the fewer people who are dying equals more people who are suffering. The people who didn't die are not okay yet. And that's what happened to me. That was my story. My life of recovery did not begin the day after I woke up from that heroin overdose. It was 3 years later. So the people that see a liaison year after year, month after month, and one day decide, I have come to a place of hope, like we learned this morning, where they are ready to kick into action, they know the guy. They know who he is. They know Justin. They know Dave. They know Keith. They know who to call. They see him. They can say something. Hey, you know, I think I want to do that today. Let's go. Let's get in the car. It's amazing. That is so wonderful, to be consistent, to have a program that is there on a regular basis is a wonderful thing. And the other thing that I've learned from recovery is the whole thing about no borders. There are no walls. You know, I had the opportunity years back to work at an agency in the field, and we would go to people's homes to deliver addiction treatment. And you could walk in and you could see by what's on the TV, you can judge in your mind for 1/2 a second, talk about stigma. Well, this is what the guy's watching, this is probably what he's like. And whether it was which cable news station or which sports he was watching. And there's this amazing thing to be a peer worker, or whether it's called a liaison or anything else. The idea is it doesn't matter. Recovery crosses all those barriers. It's demographically, my wife and I, we spend a lot of our recovery in Los Angeles. Well, you could go and see people with really fancy cars parked in the red because they don't care about a ticket, and they're miserable because they're ready to launch into this recovery journey. Has no demographic, like in Maine, it's a lot of rural areas, and there are demographic, the balance of demographics is different in every state. But what's wonderful about our 31 liaisons in 16 counties, and then the recovery coaches, is diversity. Diversity by county, diversity by the skill set for all the individuals. It's a wonderful team. And I was privileged to get to know everybody when I started with the program. And that was the thing that was outstanding, was the diversity. Like, this is an amazing group of people. When I was in the field, we used to call, we're somewhere between the Dirty Dozen and the Bad News Bears. Like we might not be all-stars, but we're going to kick ass when the enemy's coming. And that, I think, is the strength, that there's this group of people throughout the state. And what a wonderful initiative that, and I know Gordon and Sarah and Catherine, Rob Porter, Sybil, you built this program to be everywhere. And the ongoing work is about, let's make sure that every county is well represented, that there's, and the demographic differences within. We had a talk, I was talking to The folks over at Sweetser, the difference between parts of York, the difference between, it's a lot like a lot of states. The coasts are one way and the interior's another, but it doesn't matter. If you need help, it doesn't matter. If you come to a place of, if you reach that level of humility that you're ready to ask for help, who cares, right? And the essence of being able to carry a message is not demographic either. It's like lived experience in its purest form is, this is what happened to me, and maybe it'll work for you. And that's it. Maybe it will. And if they get a twinkle in their eye, you say, follow me. Let's go. Get in the car. We're going. And sometimes they don't go that day, and that's the consistency is, well, maybe tomorrow. And we all know what that's like. I don't know how many times, how many pamphlets my mother put in my sock drawer until thinking, well, if he finds that pamphlet, maybe he'll call somebody. It's like, no, that's not what happened. But one day I did. So I thank all the liaisons, and I thank all of the state. I thank the resources that have been provided for everybody. Because when you live it, you know the value of it, and you know that there's nothing like, and I've been in places where there are people with fancier initials after their name, and they're like, well, we don't know what to do. We better get the peer in there because I'm not getting anywhere. And that is always a great day when you're in this work. Is, yeah, the guy wants to talk to me, but he doesn't want to talk to the MLADAC, or it's like, nope, I don't want to talk to the psychologist. I want to talk to the peer. I need somebody who gets this, who understands. So anyway, I really thank everybody. Thank you for your story. The backbone was with the data, and all the liaisons and the recovery coaches and all the supporting agency staff and leadership. It's been my pleasure to get to know them all and work as close as I can to help sustain this program to its fullest, to execute on a daily basis the best options program that we can. And I know we have a couple of minutes left. If anybody have a question or would like to chime in, feel free to do so now. Sure. Well, and if we weren't, there is always a way. The simple answer, and I was at a facility last week in Kittery, and the answer is, hey, we're helping people, and it looks a lot like it. It's like, hey, if we're helping people and you're helping people, swapping numbers, sharing it, collaborating as a resource, it just starts with that. There's never a bad phone call. There's never a bad contact. And at some point, are we doing the same thing? So be it. We have a lot of talk amongst the liaisons. Where are the borders? And yeah, contractually there are borders, and you have this county and they have that county. But at some point, it's one state, it's one group, it's certainly one program, and worst case is the guy has more help, the human has more help than they need. Worst case, right? That would not be a bad thing. Anybody else have anything to say? Comment? It's a wonderful world to be able to help somebody, and I think it came up earlier today as well, the idea of service, that idea that, and recovery is really about that. It's the idea to have, how do you sustain recovery? How do you sustain anything? Finding ways to be useful and of purpose. If you can find that, you can fill that hole that you then don't need to fill with addiction or any other behavior that's a barrier to your growth as a human. And it's a wonderful thing to provide that as a profession where you can have a job. And we often have to talk about the challenges of this work, right? Whether it's burnout or compassion fatigue, but it is a job too. They have to deal with it from the HR of their job, the the working for a company, just like working for the state. You have employment realities. But the essence of the work, the story that Justin told today, that gives you usefulness and a purpose that is way beyond the salary and the rate of pay. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And it's not unique to substance use disorder and help like this, but boy, oh boy, it's in high demand. And I've been fortunate enough to see it in my personal life, in my marriage, in my family, and I'm really grateful that I've been able to do it with the options program and working at OBH and SUD. And I thank so much to the whole options team, to Director Squirrel, to Catherine Coutu, and my whole team that I get to be a part of. And I think we'll end with that. Thank you.